Hello, so this is Haven and I am doing part number 12 in the Blender for Beginners series, and I'm going to run through a couple more modifiers with you, some of the more used or commonly used modifiers. This is going to be just about the last class in the tutorial in the modeling for Blender for Beginners. I'll probably do another video of some quick hints and tips, and then we're going to move on to a tutorial series on unwrapping and texturing and materials and all that other fun stuff, maybe even some multiple UV mapping things. So stay tuned for those, but for now let's get to the modifiers. So I'm going to go ahead and add a mesh cube. Oh, I do not know what I just added there. I added a circle instead of a cube. Okay, so there we go. And I'm just going to grab it up on the Z-axis a little bit. And by now you know how to do that. GZ. And I hit 1, enter on the number pad. So now it's sitting on top of my grid. Alright, so I'm going to go to the modifiers tab, which of course is this wrench icon. And click on add modifier and watch what happens along the x-axis as I pull the modifier up. So add modifier, and I'm choosing the array. Again, watch what happens. It looks as if the block actually doubled in its size along the x-axis, but honestly what's really happened is that a copy of the cube was made, a duplicate, and it was put right next to the first one, end to end. And if I go into edit mode, you can actually see that this is the first cube and this is the second one. And they are exactly alike. No matter what I do to the first one, it will be done to the second one. So this is a complete duplicate copy. And remember, the modifier is not applied. So this is only fake mesh right now. It's not quite real just yet, okay? So let's go ahead and look at the settings here. The first thing that we have is the fit type. Now there are a few types. Fit curves a little more adventurous or a little more advanced. We're going to skip that one for right now, but we do have fit length to look at. And when you click on fit length, you'll see that you have length here, and what you can do is put number of units, like Blender units. So in the default size, this cube is 2 units by 2 by 2 in all directions. And you can kind of see that with the grid here. Here's a unit, and here's a unit, okay? So if I were to say change this to 8 units, now it is 8 wide. If you count the little grid squares there, there's 8 of them. So you can fit this by length. Now, the next thing that we have is fixed count. And this is actually what's on by default when you first open up the modifier. And it does it by the number of copies you want. So 2, of course, is the first one and a copy. If I go to 3, it's 2 copies and the first, and so on and so on. And you can go as far as you want to on this. Now the next thing that we have are these offsets, constant offset and relative offset. Constant offset is done more in according to your grid here. So if I go ahead and turn constant offset on and relative off, and let's go ahead and just up this a little bit. Do you see what's happening? Let's get to 1. And let me go ahead and take this down to just 2. Okay, so it's taking the origin of the copy and placing it at the actual 1 mark on the grid. Okay, so this origin and the origin that would be for this cube are exactly 1 Blender unit apart. The one for relative offset does it by geometry. So right now in front view, you see that this piece of geometry ends at this grid mark. and this one begins at this grid mark. If I move this end further along on the X, okay, this whole thing will move out. So watch. Because relative means it is going from end to end. Constant is how it's moving it according to its origins. Usually the relative offset is what we play around with most. So let me go ahead and put that shape back a little bit. It won't be perfect, but we'll do the best we can for right now. Okay, so now I can even, actually, a little hint that I could give you for lining things up is I have all 4 of those vertices selected right there down the middle. And this is the x-axis. And if I want these all lined up at the same point along the x-axis, I can do S for my scale, X for the axis, and 0 for the 0 point. And now they're all lined up along the x-axis. So it's perfectly straight, in other words. Alright, so now not only can you do this on the x-axis, you can do it on the y and the z. And even though x, y, and z are not written in these windows, they match up. They're still x, y, and z. So if I were to, let's say, do a fixed count of about 4, and I went ahead and let's say I did a little bit of a count here on the y, you see it's moving back away from us. So it's kind of diagonally going back. And you can even do z. So let me take this back to 0 and lift the z up. And what you get when you do that is, well, you can actually make a set of stairs very easily. Oops, I didn't grab them all. And I can pull that out. And you see they all size up because, again, they're all duplicates. And you can change them all until you apply them. After you apply this, you'll have to model each one individually if that's what you wanted to do. So this is a really fun tool. People use this to make fences, to make rose petals on a flower, to make leaves on a vine, to make buttonholes in a corset, to make studs on a belt, to make chains for a necklace. Its possibilities are unlimited. You can do so much with this this modifier. It's just great. So I would suggest coming in here and practicing a little bit. I'm going to have some tutorials, more intermediate ones at some point, and I'll be doing one on the curve aspect of this, but it goes along with another modifier. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get rid of this modifier, and let's go ahead and let's do another one. So we're going to do the mirror modifier. And the mirror modifier is based on this origin right here. So anything, let's say the positive x to the negative x gets mirrored to the opposite side. Anything from the bottom gets mirrored on the top. Anything on the top gets mirrored to the bottom. And that goes the same with the actual y-axis. And it is all based on where this origin is. So anything on one side of the origin, of course, mirrored to the opposite. Now, when we do this, if I were to add the mirror modifier right now, and let me go ahead and do that, it'll look like nothing happened. So mirror modifier. And the reason that nothing has happened, or it looks like nothing happened, is because we just kind of mirrored this x to this side, this x to that side. Same for the up and down and the back and forth, so you really don't see anything. You can see it here a little bit from where remember when I lined it up on the x-axis, I didn't line it up on the z, so my one side was down a little bit. So you can see that when it mirrored up from the opposite side. Hopefully that's pretty clear right there. Okay, so let's go ahead and see this in actual action though. I'm going to put it in tab mode, or edit mode with tab. And because you cannot move the origin in edit mode, it leaves me the ability to pull this over. Do you see how that's working? To this side of the origin. Isn't that kind of cool? So now anything that is on this side is getting mirrored to that side. So let me go ahead and go back. And I'm going to select all of it. And now when I pull that out, the whole thing gets mirrored over. Now, if I were to take this and let's say turn on the y-axis so it mirrors on the y as well, you can see what we have there. And if I do it on the z-axis and lift this up, then I have it here. Most projects, when you start though, you're going to have a piece of geometry. So let me go ahead and turn this off for a second. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to leave this as it is. And you can see that the origin is not at the center. But most times when you have an object and you're going to begin to put it into the mirror modifier, your origin will be centered. So let's go ahead and set origin in the tool shelf. Origin to geometry. And let me just give you a quick little display of how we can get this origin where we want it so that we can actually have a mirror modifier that works perfect for whatever we're working on. So I'm going to tab into edit mode and I'm going to select, let's say this, I'll select this one back here. I'm going to select that vertex. And now I'm going to do Shift and S. And Shift and S brings up your snap menu. And when you get your snap menu up, you can actually snap your cursor to the selected. So since I have that vertice selected, now the cursor is there. Do you see that? Let me undo this. So Control Z. The cursor isn't going to move with, what was I thinking? The cursor doesn't move, so let me put it back here. Shift and S and cursor to selected. And now you see it snap up there. Now, keeping that there, don't change that. Go into object mode. And now in your set origin, you can set your origin to the 3D cursor. And now our origin is down here. And so in edit mode, let me select all. There you can see the origin down there. You can see it even with it not selected. And I can put my cursor centered again if I want to. But now when I mirror this, you can see that the origin is at the corner. So anything below it will get mirrored up, backwards, and to the negative side of the X. I just think that this is great. Okay, so anything that you do now is going to get mirrored to the other side. So let's go ahead and pull the mirror modifier up. And now watch what happens. As I pull this out, its mirrored counterpart gets pulled in the opposite direction. If I move this down, then of course that goes down with it. Now, when you go to apply this, there are this thing called the merge. And so when you go to apply this, these two vertices will become one. So it won't be like two separate objects. It'll be one and it'll be connected here. That's of course after you apply it, and this is real mesh. If I turn merge off and I apply the modifier, these will not be merged together. So it'll still almost be like two loose objects, or two loose parts, but it'll still be one object. The clipping is nice, especially for things that maybe you want them to be perfectly lined up on one side and not on the other. So if you were making a jacket and you needed the front of the jacket open, you could turn clipping off and you could spread the front of the jacket open. But the back of the jacket would have to stay closed. So here, let me just open these a little bit for you to see. So if you turn clipping on, and now I move this, do you see it only goes to where the other one is? It stops exactly together, and now you cannot pull them apart. You can lift them up together, you can even pull them back and forth together, but along this axis, you cannot pull them away from each other. So again, you'll see that you can go to it and no further. You can't pull it apart or anything. Now, if you had clipping off, and let's say your pieces were crossed like that, and so let me do it like that so you can see it a little bit better. And then you decide to turn clipping on, nothing really happens. You have to actually pull back to it, and then they'll be clipped. So you can see that they are together, and I can't pull them apart. Alright, so that's the mirror modifier. Anything you have on any of those sides of the origin is going to get mirrored to the other side. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and delete this modifier, and I am going to set my origin back to the center. So set origin to geometry, and there, we're all set to go. Let me just go into front view and just move this a little bit. Okay, so the last one that I want to show you right now is called the subsurf subdivision. So I'm going to put it in edit mode and select all of this. I'm going to give it just a couple of subdivisions, a couple of cuts there, and maybe 6 of them. And now, when I go into the modifier and I add subdivision surface, you can see that it automatically changes. It's a lot different than what it was. Okay, this is not beveled, although right now we have the beveled effect. I'm going to go into edit mode here, and if I zoom in on these faces, you can see here, for example, that these 4 faces are now subdivided on the mesh, the object, but not on the cage. So the fake mesh in this instance is that this face on the object has been subdivided like that. And this one has, and this one has, and this one has. Every face is now actually 4 faces on the object. So remember we had the bevel that just cut off the corner, but the cage didn't show that corner being cut off. It was still in place. Well, that's exactly the same here. These 4 faces will not show until you actually apply the modifier. So let me go ahead and apply it just so you can see. And now you can see each one of those 4 faces has been cut into 4 more, or each one of those faces has been cut into 4. So I'm going to go back, and I'm going to get my modifier back and put the cage on. So by default, our view is set to 1. 1 is like number of subdivisions. So where 1 is just like 1 cut each direction, the view of 2 is going to be each one of those little subdivisions has been subdivided again. So in other words, this one face with 1 view went to 4 faces. With 2 views, it goes to 16 faces. And that just goes on and on and on. Now, the thing is that's really cool about the subdivision is that when we try to pull out parts of the cage now, you'll see that it's very curvy. It's very smooth. This subdivision, is trying to keep its shape, which is flat here. And this part of the cage is trying to pull it out. So you get this really smooth effect of one fighting the other, trying to pull one, and this one trying to keep it. It's a little messy sometimes too, like you can see around here. But there's all kinds of things that you can do with this. One of the things that I like to give an example of is, let's say that we have all of these selected. And I'm going to do, actually, let me just do one of them. And we'll do it up here on top. And I'm going to go ahead and do this one over here as well. And now I'm going to do E for extrude on the Z axis. And you can see I can bring them straight up. I can take these and scale them apart from each other on the Y axis a little bit if I want to. And so now I get these two extensions almost like, well, what could be bunny ears at some point, or could be antenna for a Martian, or whatever you like. The thing about this is when you extrude it, you see that you've got this area here where it doesn't quite fit into the actual cage anymore. It just kind of sticks out here. And you can see up here that there is such a difference between the roundedness of the mesh and the straight lines of the cage. You can actually adjust that if you want to, and adjust this by simply using edge loops. So if I use Control R and I put an edge loop here and slide it down, do you see what happens? Let me go ahead and do it again because I was kind of cammed a little far away. Do you see how it's pushing that mesh down? It's kind of like containing it a little bit, getting it to stay where it wants. And this is going to be a really nice technique about extruding on the subdivision and using your loop tools to make nice creases and things like that, like maybe in seams on a pair of pants, or the lining of a jacket, all kinds of things. Making the outline of a belt or pant pockets. This kind of technique comes in handy. So Shift and Control and R again, and this time if I bring it up, do you see how it changes the top of the shape there? You can round it out a little nicer. You can bring it to where it's almost flat yet still somewhat rounded. You can even take this and scale it up and kind of get something a little bit wider there. So you can have all kinds of fun with this. This tool is also really good for like modeling. So if you were to do something like, let's say you have an eye that you want to put in. And so I'm going to come here and put in another subdivision. I can take this one and pull it down, this one and pull it up. I can even, well, let's subdivide these two sides as well real quick since we're here. And I can move this out. So I have something just a little more circular. And if I go into Face Select, and I choose that face, and let's say I do extrude on the Z-axis. Like that, or the X-axis I should have done. That's alright, it didn't count for the Z anyways. But now you see that you can pull that in, and that's a little messy. You can see that it's not quite as smooth as you'd like it to be, but yeah, it's a lot nicer than just pushing a square in and trying to manipulate, you know, the sides to be round. But also, let's say I extrude this again. So selecting that face and extrude it again. You can start to get something really nice here. That actually looks pretty crappy. Maybe smooth this shading out a little bit. There, smooth shading seems to help. You can also do things like vertex select. So let's go here. And because this is on a subsurf modifier, we have another tool called Crease. And if we use Shift and E and pull our mouse out, you'll see that it tightens up the subsurf edge to the actual edge that you have on the mesh. And so now you can see how that's a little more well defined. It's a little crisper around that thing. And of course you can create, you know, your mouth and your nose and things like that. You can start to take your bunny ears or your shape here and start to move it in all kinds of ways to make all kinds of shapes. But that's a subsurf in a nutshell. Experimenting with that is more than I could probably show you right now. I've done this video like 10 times and I keep getting interrupted, and I'm so afraid I'm going to get interrupted again. But also these views, you can already tell that they create a lot of geometry. Every view you go up, you really should not go up more than 2 views. Clothing or attachments, 2 views is more than enough usually. And 1 view is usually really good for any kind of build that you're making. Anything more than that and you've just got a ton of geometry, that's really not needed, first of all. Second of all, if you go too high up on these views, then you're asking Blender to do a lot of work and it could actually crash and burn on you, so that you can end up making, more work for yourself by losing the work that you've gotten done already. But it's interesting to see is how this would look without the subsurf on it compared to having it on there. So quite a difference if you ask me. See how choppy and blocky it is? And you turn oops, I applied it on accident. But anyways, so there you go. That's a subsurf modifier in a nutshell. Have fun and experiment with these. There are other tutorials that I have that use some of these tools in more depth. So after you've practiced just a little bit with the basics, look for those ones. They have a little more detail in them about how they work and a few more examples. The next tutorial I'll do is I'm going to do a few quick tips and tricks, shortcuts and things that you can use, or other tools, and going into some of the menus. So stay tuned and look for that one as well. Please subscribe, please share, please like. Make sure that other people that want to learn how to work with Blender find the link so that they can become addicts like we are. And we'll catch you at the next one.